going to skip a class, so the next video will be in 2 weeks, next class in 2 weeks. The third, Genesis 1:3, the third sentence we translated as, and expressed softly by a power of boundaries, let be pure clarity, and it is pure clarity. So instead of saying light, we call the light clarity. The third sentence is a continuation of the second sentence in a variety of ways. And one of those ways is that the second verse is talking about desire and what happens in desire. And the third, which creates a haze, when there's just a tremendous amount of desire and how the clarity is brought forth. So another way to look at the second sentence is that the words tohu vavohu, which is void and emptiness, which we've translated as movement without form, flow without shape, they are not here anymore. Because there's clarity, those things are not here, and there's not that they've disappeared, but they've gone to a deeper part of creation, another part. It's like there are things that we have within us. When we're clear, whatever we're going through suddenly disappears. It doesn't mean whatever it is doesn't exist within us. It's just suddenly buried or disappeared to another place within us. And so the clarity gives rise to moving away whatever issue was there before. So it's still there in creation, but it's now a deeper place. If you're talking about different places, it's a deeper place. And what the clarity now does is that when there's darkness, a thick haze, or there's mayim, a tremendous flow of energy, the clarity now allows that we can have a comprehension of what is happening. Because in desire and in flow and in haze, there is lack of comprehension. And this gives us some type of comprehension. And the question is what type of comprehension, but it is comprehension. In this verse it says Yihar, which is normally translated as light, but Yihar means it should be clarity. And it says Hashem said Yihar, and then Vayihar, and it became clarity. And so it can be explained that the words, as far as the desire, needs to have pure clarity. Except that Vayihi, the world is not ready, or the desire is not ready to have that type of clarity. So in this verse that's saying there should be clarity, that God said there should be clarity and there became clarity, it's also saying there should be clarity. Clarity is needed. But it's very possible that the desire that we have, or there's a part of us that cannot absorb that type of clarity. We can only absorb so much clarity. If it's too much information, we can't absorb it. So just clarity on its own sometimes may be overwhelming, although normally clarity means it's clear, so it's given to you in the amount that you can comprehend it. The Zohar says that there were 7 types of clarity created before this world. What does it mean, 7 types of clarity before this world? If you're talking about before Bereshis, before the first word of the Torah, before the wisdom, and you're talking about clarity, that's difficult to say that because before that, the Creator and everything was one. Clarity didn't exist as clarity. Everything was clear. There was no haze, there was no clarity. So it's talking really about this area where we are here. The first chapter of Genesis is all created in the thought of the Creator. The physical realm hasn't materialized. It doesn't materialize till later on, maybe in chapter 2 of Genesis. And so therefore, it's talking about clarity here in the first chapter. Before the physical world comes out, there are different levels of clarity that are created, even in thought. the word, it says, Vayomer Elokim, and Elokim said, Yehi Or. There should be clarity. Elokim is translated as law, power of law and stringency, or power of boundaries. And there's a question here. If you have stringency and law, rigidity, boundaries, where does the kindness and mercy come from? Do we say that there's kindness and mercy coming from the name of Elokim as well? And the idea of the word of Elokim is that it reflects an amazing ability of transformation. And since all powers of creation are here together, the limitation doesn't limit things as it does in the physical, but what the idea of limitations does in a spirit form or in the thought form, it allows for expression to move forward, allows for clarity to come out. Whereas beforehand, the clarity had no expression, no words. Now the clarity, by definition, has words. So Elokim is merciful in that it allows us to have comprehension and understanding of things. By delineating things, we have a way to grasp it. Otherwise, we have no way of grasping the Creator because we don't have words for it. And in the creation, since everything at this point coexists as one, so it doesn't need to be transformed here. But later on, when things start being expressed in creation, it has, if you can reconnect something to its origin in the creation and in the Creator, it has automatic transformation because there everything coexists. It's not a difficult time to transform. A person may have a difficult time in dealing with their emotions or thoughts or things, and how do I change? But when you go to that space, transformation is very easy. And that's also a fascinating thing, because when people are on a spiritual journey, they get very stuck in where they are. Just like people in a physical place can be very stuck, so too people in their spiritual perspectives, they can get very stuck on one point or one place where they are. Those are spiritual realms. They each have their own specific limitation and place, whereas if you connect with the Creator, everything is in the same place, so you don't have to be one way or another. It doesn't matter which way things are. It's all the Creator. Yes?
You mentioned connect with the Creator.
Mm-hmm.
But the Creator is formless.
Right.
We don't know how to describe the Creator.
That's correct. The word Creator is also not the correct word, but in order to have a word to use to refer to it, I use the word Creator, but it's not limited to the word Creator, because it's not, in a certain sense, it's not the Creator. It everything happens not because it has to intend to create, because that has no form and shape. All opposites come from it as well, but they don't detract because it's still in the same energy of the Creator. The opposite exists there because it has no limit. So, in a physical sense, we don't understand how an opposite can exist in the same place maybe so easily, but from the perspective of no form and no shape, it doesn't make a difference. So everything kind of happens because the source has no definition, no beginning, no end. Everything can happen, and so everything does happen. And so the Creator in itself is also a strange word, but that's a term we use just to help. Yeah.
I've heard, I don't know where it came from, Talmud or which writing, they say that in the beginning, before any creation, Hashem, the Creator, the Almighty, whatever word, occupied everything.
Correct.
And that actually, in order for physical things to be created, Spirit withdrew from some space to allow for the creation of other things.
Okay, so your question is that since it says that the Creator withdrew from space
Is that
to
the
allow
right
something, the
interpretation?
question is what is that withdrawing? What is it referring to? And what does it mean? When you dig a hole, the earth fills the space and you take out the earth. So there's a space there. It's either full with earth or it's full with air. Okay? But the space is there irrespective. Okay? So the Creator fills all space. But in terms of our existence, the Creator allowed that within in that space that the Creator fills, it should be air or it should be earth or water, but the Creator still fills that hole. That hole is only to allow something to exist in that space that has a definition, but the non-entity, the non-definition still exists there. So we have the earth, we have the universe, we have everything which is definition, but the non-definition still exists everywhere equally. It's in our mind, okay? When we think of something, our mind is constantly moving, whether you know what you're thinking about or not. Assuming you're alive anyway. So it's thinking, and we can focus. We can choose sometimes to fill the space of our mind with something or not. Our energy is still filling it. The fact that we're thinking about one thing or another doesn't change that our mind is still our mind. It doesn't detract from our mind. It doesn't add to it. It's just in that space. So in a certain sense, all existence is in the space of the Creator. It doesn't change anything from that nothingness. Another way of translating the word Vayomer Elokim Yehi'or is that the verse is that when there was a thick haze, not understanding, Elokim requested, Vayomer Elokim requesting that it's a definition and saying we need to define something here. So the power of definition requested that there should be Or, and so Or, clarity, so therefore clarity materialized. Vayihi Or, when it reflects that Or already existed. So on one hand you can say it was created at this point, or you could say Vayihi Or, that it existed beforehand in potential, and it only materialized at this point. And the lesson from that is that sometimes when things come up, something new comes up, or people don't like something, they throw out everything. The expression, throw out the baby with the bathwater. But what happens is, when you throw out everything, you're angry, and you may be 100% correct in your anger and frustration, but when you throw out everything, you negate everything, you negate the good as well as the negative. And so the lesson here, that it existed before and only came out now, is that if you listen to the old, then you'll be able to hear the new as well, and how to apply it in the new setting. So the structures of what you don't like, or you're angry about or upset about, may not work anymore, but the quality of what used to exist, or the potential, is something that one still needs to listen to in order to bring it forth. Because if you just try to create a new way of life, a new religion, a new philosophy, a new everything, and you've discarded everything else, you're just creating another thing that will end up being a whole and destructive. So you have to learn how to listen to bring from the old into the new as well. And that's also an aspect of redemption. The idea of redemption, it's not just you're redeemed from where you are and you're going to go to a place, but one has to look at where we come from, take out the lessons from the past, look at the source and the energy, and when you can connect with that, then you can transcend the problems that exist at the moment, and you can transport yourself in that way to a future, a different type of future. But you have to take that connection with you, because if you don't have it, you can end up with another problem, which is very common. Anyway, another way to translate verse number 3, sorry, is, and brought forth in thought the comprehension of a power of boundaries delineates that there needs to be pure clarity. So the need draws forth pure clarity from the source, which is the wisdom of the Creator, in the word of Bereshis. That's another way to understand or translate, which translates an interpretation of verse 3 of the Torah. When it says Vayomer Elokim, and Elokim said, we've mentioned a few things about saying that it's a softness. It's a very powerful thing, but the word Amar, to say, has many different meanings as well, in Hebrew and in Aramaic. I'm not going to go through them at the moment, but sometimes you say Amar Rahmano, the Torah says, and that means it's, when it says that, then it's talking about law. Halacha l'Moshe Sinai. So the Machzor Vitri says that the word Amar, saying, sometimes refers to halacha. Halacha means halicha, movement. It's talking about structure of movement. That the word Vayomer gives structure of movement in the creation. There's another place, the Tosfos Yom Tov, Baba Kama brings that the word Amar, Amro Chachamim, is Lashon Takana, fixing, correcting something. So many times the word says, and God said, or the Kim said, Yukevavke. We've mentioned that it could be thought, it's often thought, but it has other meanings. It could be fixed, corrected, it could be elevated. There are many different interpretations of what the word actually means, and we'll bring them up at different points as well. Now, although this verse 3, is talking about clarity, within this verse you have all the aspects of the first verse as well. You have boundaries, Elokim. You have balance, because clarity is brought to balance the haze that exists, and you have wisdom, because the clarity takes from the wisdom, takes from the wisdom of creation. So you actually have the elements of the first verse in here as well. Although not in an explicit way, but it's there. So I'll just go from here to a story, an interesting story. Just before I do that, I'll tell another short story. Rabbi Elazar Hagadol, a very famous rabbi in ancient times at Tana. It says that he never made up something on his own. Everything he repeated was everything he learned from his teachers. He never made up anything of his own. In another place it says he said things that no one ever heard before. So it's a question. It would seem like a contradiction. So Rabbi Kook, who was the first head chief rabbi of Israel, was actually one of the most brilliant people of our generation, he brings this question in his letters, and he says what it's talking about is they all heard the same thing, but what he heard in the words of his teachers, the others didn't hear. The others only heard physical words. They didn't hear what was behind the words, the depth behind it. He heard that. So he said things that no one else heard, but he heard it through the words of his teachers. Sometimes that is something important as well, because when people interpret the Torah, most people are stuck on the word. This is what the word is, and they don't see anything behind the word. They don't connect. There's a lot more behind it. Anyway, there's a famous story of Rabbi Elazar who wanted to meet Elijah the prophet. And after much preparation, spiritual preparation, the prophet finally appeared to him. And Rabbi Elazar requested that from Elijah, from Eliyahu, that if he could go with him on his journeys. He travels all over. I'd like to come along. So Eliyahu said, fine, you can come along, but on one condition. Don't ask any questions. If you ask a question, I'll answer you, but after that I will disappear. And Rabbi Elazar agreed. So that evening they went to the house of a pauper who lived with his family in a one-room house, which was quite common in previous generations, that everyone lived in the same room, slept in the same room. And this man owned a cow. And the cow was how they lived. They milked it every day. I guess it grazed outside in the grass, and they milked it every day. Now, even though they had one room and they were very poor, they gave these two people a place to sleep. In the middle of the night, Eliyahu got up and killed the cow, and then he asked Rabbi Elazar to leave the house with him. Rabbi Elazar was amazed. Here these poor people, give what they have, and this is how you pay them back. But he couldn't say anything. And so they traveled, and they came to a house of a wealthy person. And there they weren't received so graciously. He wasn't happy, but he gave them a place to sleep. In the middle of the night, Eliyahu arose, and the guy had a house, and he built, with whatever abilities, powers he had, he built 2 more stories to the house and made it much grander than it was, very big. And then they left. And then they were traveling. They came to a house where the people didn't want to receive them at all. And Eliyahu the prophet, Elijah, blessed them. They should all be leaders. And they left, and they went to another home where they were greeted warmly. They stayed the night, and as they were leaving, Eliyahu said, you should only have one leader. And Elazar was very perplexed. Everything that's happening is contrary to the way he thinks. And he couldn't believe, what kind of a prophet is this guy doing things to people? So he asked him about what he did. And he said, you sure you want to know? He said, yeah. So he asked him about the things, and Allah said the first home, the man was a poor man, and his wife was supposed to die. So I was able to pray, and in heaven changed the cow for his wife. Instead of his wife dying, the cow died. So it didn't look good, but he had his wife. And in the second home, there was a treasure buried under the wealthy man's home. It wasn't very nice at all. But had he dug, he would have found the treasure. So I added 2 stories. So in the morning, when he gets up to look at his house again, he was going to tear down the house and rebuild a big house. But now that I added it, he will decide not to do it, because he now sees it's a lot bigger than he thought. So he won't find the treasure. Then the family that gave us hospitality, that didn't want to give us hospitality, I blessed them. They should all be leaders. Why? Because each one wants to be a leader and each one wants to be in control. They'll never have peace with each other. And the family that so graciously accepted us with warmth, I blessed them to have one leader, because when you have one leader, then you have unity and togetherness. And that's how we answered him, and after that he disappeared. That was the story there. And I've always found that a very interesting, besides the lessons of the story, but one of the aspects that I've always found is the idea of questions. That you have to know when to ask a question and how to ask a question. And also, you have to know that there are things you don't ask a question on. If he wouldn't have asked any questions or would have kept going, at some point he probably would have gotten the information. He didn't need to know the information. But because his mind had to know the information, he got the information, but because of that, he didn't get more information. Which, if he would have been quiet, he would have kept traveling with him and eventually wouldn't have gotten more information. And sometimes you chase things and they don't come to you and you wonder why. So there's more than just the stories. It's the idea of questioning it and how and when, in addition to the lessons of the story. And I find the same thing in Chumash. We learn the Torah, we don't understand it. We understand so much, but there's a lot we don't understand. So we question. For some people, if they don't understand anything, it makes no sense, it's no good. Other people, they don't have a question in the first place. They have total belief. It doesn't matter what the words mean. They believe in a creator, they believe in a God. It doesn't matter if they learn, if they don't study, they have a total belief. It's a blind belief. For other people, it's a matter of comprehension. The question is what type of comprehension? And most people have a limited comprehension. Why? Because they accept what other people tell them. People are not trained in the schools how to analyze on their own, how to think for themselves. They're taught to think, but to think in a way that the system wants you to think. And that's why this whole first chapter and other parts of Torah are very difficult, because the system thinks in a certain way and doesn't know how to get out of it. So it teaches people to think in that way, and it gets stuck. Whereas if they taught grammar, biblical grammar, not modern Hebrew grammar, biblical grammar in a proper way, then people would think. But they don't teach it much. It's more repetitive. They give you one translation of it, sometimes two. And yeah, there's more to it, but people are not taught how to analyze it and think. It's something my grandfather taught me, so I'm very happy. He was taught that also when he was younger as well, how to analyze the words that you study. That most of the time you read and translate, but you also have to stop or often and analyze, ask what is really going on. Any questions? Okay, that's good. Now, we're going to explain a little bit more about the third verse and what's going on here in creation. The second verse is talking about what happens with desire, how a haze emerges. The third one, Vayomer Elikim, is about a softness, a power, very soft, unassuming power. When it's unassuming, it's very powerful because there's no need to say I'm powerful. No need. When someone gets up to speak and say I'm powerful, there's an issue there usually. Why do they have to do it? If you're strong, you don't have to tell people. Making a show of it means on another level you're not so strong. So people compensate for their what they're lacking by being an extrovert or by showing something. But if you're really powerful, you don't need to say anything. As the saying goes, those who know don't say, and those who say don't know. They pretend to know, but they don't really. Anyway, so the softness here in the creation, Vayomer is a soft power. It's a balancing power that's used in the creation of proper boundaries. And not only does it use proper boundaries, but it gives strength for those boundaries to be what they are and not be something else. And so therefore, this Vayomer brings about the perfect balance between clarity and haze. So, because everything is happening in thought, normally you think haze is one thing and clarity is another. Here, the haze has within it clarity, and the clarity has within it haze, because they're both in the same thought, an energy of the Creator. Or and Choshech coexist together as one. Yes.
I hate to say it, it's because it's bringing a word in from another culture, but when you were just describing haze and clarity, I was thinking of yin and yang.
Yin and yang, yes. That's fine. What it is that when the haze that's here is a haze to creation, it's not a haze to the Creator. So the clarity is not clarity to the Creator, it's only to the recipients, the difference between clarity and haze. But to the Creator, it's the same thing, because everything is obvious. So here clarity comes from or through the surge of life force. When you have a question, when something is going on in life and you don't understand it, you can't always get an answer. Sometimes you have to wait a day, a week, a month. Sometimes you have to wait and give it time. And with time, you get an answer that you couldn't create at the moment that you asked the question. So as the life force continues, it brings clarity as to why things are existing and what is happening. But at this point, everything's still extremely sensitive and vulnerable, and it's still a creation that's expanding. Just as when you look to outer space, where does it finish? Just keeps going. We say it keeps expanding. It's just the creation is expanding. As we go through each word and each verse, it keeps expanding. Clarity here defines the desire of the Creator. In the previous verse, desire was indecisive. It was an endlessness, it was a thick haze, it had no form or shape. But now we have clarity without the indecisiveness. What's the clarity that we have? The clarity is that everything that exists is the will of the Creator. So in verse 2, we had no comprehension. What's going on here? Where's it going? What's its purpose? In verse 3, we don't need to know the answer to those questions because the Creator knows why it exists. Everything exists because the Creator wants it to exist at this moment. So knowing, accepting that everything is the way the Creator wants it at this moment brings a clarity, because you're not attached to an agenda, you're not attached to an ego, you're not attached to anything except whatever it is that the Creator wants. So you don't get sidetracked. And the truth is, it is the Creator's desire, even though we don't comprehend it. But that's being clear. You know you don't comprehend it, and you know it's the Creator's desire. That's clear. If you know what you don't know, that's clarity. Or is an element that plays heavily in everything that unfolds. Clarity is in everything. Clarity could be called common sense as well. You can learn laws and have a lot of knowledge, but that knowledge can be a potential for constructive and developmental issues or destructive things. But the application of common sense takes the knowledge and uses it for constructive and proper purposes. Many people go their whole life, they're searching for the light. They're looking for light. Where is the light? Not realizing that light is a creation as well. Where is the clarity? But often the light or the clarity seems to elude them. It can be in front of them. They just don't see it. There are many truths that are in front of people, but they either don't see it or they choose not to see it. Or they allow others to talk in what they should be seeing about the situation, whether it's true or not. And when we base our decisions on what other people see, one of the problems is we may be afraid to acknowledge our own feelings. There's nothing wrong if we don't understand, and there's nothing wrong if we have a different feeling. These are all normal things. So a lot of times people don't want to say I'm wrong, or maybe my feeling is, I don't know. Let me go with what they say, because then they'll judge me as, being good. And right, if I say different, they'll judge me as different. Or what are the consequences if I think differently? Maybe they're right. I don't really know. Maybe they're right. So people have a lot of fears, a lot of issues, but those fears and issues don't bring clarity to the person. So this is something that people need to know, that if you want clarity, you have to know your own limitations. Because without knowing the limitations, you don't really know where you are. You fool yourself thinking you fool yourself thinking where you are, because that becomes your whole vision, and you don't see outside of it. So what you may call clarity may not be real clarity. It may be just blindness. Which is why sometimes what's clear for one person isn't clear for another. Everyone has a different perception, different aspect of clarity for whatever reason, for a variety of reasons. Anyway, the more sensitive a person is, the more they can relate to a space that's beyond the physical. And not only beyond the physical, but ultimately beyond the spiritual. Because spirituality and spiritual realms are also a creation. And since they are a creation, they also have a limitation. Although spiritual and physical are two different concepts, they're actually one from the Creator's perspective because they're both boundaries. The Creator created physical, the Creator created spiritual, two separate things. And so, from the Creator's perspective, which is not defined, the Creator is beyond the creation, and therefore it's the same thing, spiritual or physical. So if you want to just become spiritual, it's a nice thing, a proper thing, but it doesn't necessarily connect you directly with the Creator. It connects you with that spiritual thing that you're connecting to. And light is also a spiritual creation that you connect to. It's not the Creator, even though people seem to think it is. When a person dispenses wisdom in a soft manner, a person who's truly wise gives over the wisdom in a soft manner, usually. But what happens is people tend not to hear. Why? Because people are accustomed to listening to people who have the loudest voice, people who bully, people who push. If it's loud, they hear it. But if it's soft, what did you say? And many times if you don't say it just in a commanding voice or in a powerful voice, you give it as a suggestion, they won't hear it either. It's only a suggestion, it probably doesn't mean anything. But it may have all the depth and all the knowledge you need to know. And a person who knows all the knowledge will say it in a suggestive manner, in a very soft manner. But how many people listen to that? So often, what is actually clear is people see as a haze because they can't absorb it. They're not used to absorbing it. They're used to heavy types of communication. And some of those things may be for protection, but at the same time, it does limit the person if they want to connect with the Creator and are really looking for the truth of the essence of life. So what's obvious to one person may be opaque or invisible to another. And one of the reasons is because people exist in different vibrations of creation. You know, sometimes you meet a person and you feel no connection at all. Sometimes you meet a person and you feel totally connected with them, sometimes partially. There are languages, words people say you hear, words you don't. It all depends on how you're vibrating, your frequency in your life. And depending on your frequencies depends what you'll be open to, what you'll hear or not. Thank you. So in each generation, there are people that are blessed with clarity, to see the Creator in every aspect of creation. It's a gift which people have in or use in a variety of degrees, varying degrees. Some can see clearly how the Creator is in everything and don't waste their time with superfluous or secondary issues. Others exist in a different space and waste a lot of time trying to figure out things which they don't see clearly. But there are more and more people seeing clarity, and this is actually in Jewish tradition going back. If you go back to the Mishnah or the Jerusalem Talmud, you find that one person said this is what you should do and the other one said this is what you should do, opposites. Both are in accordance to Torah. So the law they wrote later on, they wrote according to one opinion. Yet those opinions were both in accordance to Torah. How could that be? It's because when people are open to vibration, each one knows their connection and how they vibrate with the Creator. They can each go their own way even though it's opposites. But when you're looking for how people should do things together, if everyone's doing the opposite, you just create more problems. So there has to be a way to bring everyone together. But more important, when you look at the Babylonian Talmud, there's discussion and arguments back and forth all the time. If you want to sharpen your mind and way of thinking, it's very good. Why is it that the Babylonian Talmud has all this discussion, whereas the Jerusalem Talmud, just everyone says things in point? Because in ancient times, they knew information, the point. They knew which plant you should use. They didn't have all the scientific equipment to analyze things. They just knew this plant is good for this is good for this. They knew you want to build, you do this, you do that. They didn't have the tools we have. They weren't any dumber than we are because they didn't have the tools. They had more universal information. That's why they're able to build things we don't comprehend how they built it. That's why they're able to do things we don't understand, because they just knew how to do it. They didn't waste time and energy with trying to figure out backwards and forwards. We do, because we don't have their clarity. They were closer, maybe because they were closer to the beginning of time in the world, they had more clarity. We're further away from it, we have less clarity. Maybe that's what's going on, more pollution. So that's fascinating. And there are many who have clarity but choose not to reveal it. They may reveal it in private, not in public, or not in private or public. And there could be a variety of reasons. And since each situation has its own balance, that's what we have to look for, to see the Creator in everything and restore balance, which is what judgment is in Hebrew, really. It's not about good and bad, it's about finding balance for everything. And all these different considerations and thoughts and ideas, and more than what we've mentioned here tonight, are all dependent on where a person is within the creation at any particular point. The clarity that exists at the beginning of this creation still exists and fuels our daily lives. And since it's there, when we become open to it, the balance will automatically be restored, and we'll know how to do everything in its proper manner. A saying for tonight: when all seems hopeless, the Creator opens a new door. Any questions? Thoughts? Okay. Keep thinking. I'm going to go back to, I'll finish with sentence 3 soon. Just going to go through the words briefly and explain a little bit. The verse says, Vayomer kim yihar vayihar. And expressed softly by a power boundaries, let be pure clarity, and it is pure clarity. The word and at the beginning of the verse. It feels like a creation is happening. However, no reason or explanation is given for it. And as much as we try to understand what's taking place, what is taking place at the beginning of all this existence is something beyond our present comprehension. But that movement of creation will continue until at some point we'll be able to comprehend it. To whatever degree we can comprehend. Even the life we have, we don't comprehend. There are many aspects we don't comprehend. But as it moves, we have more ability to grasp it because things become defined or have definitions. And that's where patience comes in, that if you have patience, you learn more things that way. Vayoma, and expressed softly. Expressed, it's a fascinating term, actually, that because sometimes when you open up the boundaries, of creation or whatever's happening, other things, other boundaries and issues come into play. So when you open up a door, you don't know what you're opening up. It could be that other things have to be defined. Not there could be other things have to be defined and put into place. So it is an opening, but at the same time, it needs more delineation once that opening happens. When a person has a certain simplicity and is totally at one with himself and the creation, they can open up any door because they have no question, they have no need to comprehend what's happening. It's all the Creator's doing, it's the Creator understands, the Creator's responsibility. I just have to know what I need to do. And if the Creator tells me what I need to do, fine. If not, then I don't need to know. Very simple. And so they just do, and they can flow with things much easier that way. And sometimes that is in communication with people. Sometimes there are things we need to communicate, open up, and sometimes we don't need to say anything. It's okay to be silent, not say anything, because there's a comprehension that goes on. It's not a verbal communication, but there's a communication of some sort, on some level. And if people listen to those, we might have more peace also. Also, if we respect boundaries, then it's easier to explore what the true potential of something is, because you accept the boundary, you respect it, and then you use it as a base to expand from, to go to the next place. You don't get stuck in the boundary itself. A lot of people, they live with laws and with rigidity, whether it's common law, whether it's religious law, whatever boundaries they have, and they get stuck on it. It has to be this way, that way, and they lose the ability to listen to anything or to go anywhere because they're stuck by the words and boundaries that they've accepted. Why? It could be they're afraid to get out of it. Could be they just were never taught to think that there's more than the boundaries. Maybe that's how they were programmed. But any rate, here in this verse, where we say that it's expressed, the Creator is still totally at one with itself. It's all happening in the thought of the Creator. And a boundary called expression. Expression is a boundary also. When you put things into the words, it puts in a certain limitation as well, a certain framework. This expression is opened in order that other elements can have relationship. So you put your thoughts or feelings into words, which the words are limiting. And sometimes you feel you said the wrong words, you didn't say the right words, but it doesn't matter the words, it's your intention. Most of the time. Sometimes it matters what the words are, but generally the intention, and what you're doing is you're using those words, you're limiting your feeling or thoughts to words in order to have a relationship with someone or something. And with the Creator and creation. So that the words create a visible connection. Pure clarity. Sometimes a person feels clear, but no matter how clear you are, there are still things that are hidden. Anything you have, you can answer an answer, but there's still a question. Why? How? And when you get an answer to that, there's another question. There's always a question you can keep asking. So with all clarity, there are still things that are concealed. The idea of pure clarity is that there is no concealment at all. When we have clarity, we have something concealed. The clarity here is the idea that there is nothing concealed. It's a different type of clarity than we're accustomed to. I always can ask myself, what don't I know about any situation? In this place, at this point of existence, there is no what don't I know. Everything is known. When you need the information, it's there. This is different from the tohu vavohu, where nothing is concealed. The tohu vavohu, where there's no form, there is something there, but it doesn't have a form or shape. So, because there's no form or shape, there's also no concealment, because there's no expression that you need something to be concealed or hidden. And clarity is yet a product of concealment in creation. Because there's haze, because there's what we don't comprehend, therefore we need clarity. So clarity actually reflects that there's something that is not clear. Well, if you knew everything, you wouldn't need the word clarity. Clarity shows that there's something that's not clear. Okay? Whereas in the second verse, there was no concept of clarity because everything was known. Everything is one. So there's no need for an expression. Expression is usually an outward communication. It's not necessary because there's no opposite there. Wisdom is not pure clarity. That's so despite the fact that wisdom is joined by clarity. Wisdom is an entity in creation, and clarity is another entity in creation, each with its own purpose. Therefore, one can have clarity about a situation without wisdom, and one can have wisdom without clarity. And therefore you have people who are intellectuals, who learn a lot, who have a lot of knowledge about things, and no common sense. No balance. And no clarity. They're off in their own world. There isn't clarity about what we need to have clarity about with all the knowledge. So a person who has wisdom has to still follow their instincts and intuition. But that doesn't mean they have understanding of why they do everything. It's accepting that those things exist. Wisdom is wisdom of the heart. It's wisdom of the mind and wisdom of the heart. Wisdom of the heart is a knowing. It's a knowing what you have to do. It's a knowing how to do things. It's a knowing. It's not a knowing that has a comprehension of the mind. It's a knowing what's the right thing. And you have to have both types. Wisdom of the mind and the heart. They work together. But they're two different types of wisdom. And each person has his or her own unique balance in the creation. And each individual creation somehow completes the desire of the Creator in creation. And because we're each a different part of the desire in creation, that's why what's clear for one may not be clear for another. Because often in order for us to do what we need to do, we have to be blocked from other knowledge. Sometimes knowing too much is also not so good. So, for example, we live our life. How many of us don't remember a lot of things? We went through experiences of pain, happiness, and some of them we remember, some we don't. But we have this forgetfulness, a blockage, which enables us to move forward in life. If the feeling of the pain remains with us, we can't move forward. The anguish, the pain. So the forgetfulness and the limitations we have is a blessing if we want to move forward as well. So everything works in two different ways. And so the clarity that comes from the Creator is not just a clarity, it's a clarity that's here to set up the proper boundaries that people will need to exist in this realm. So the aura, the clarity here, people can look at it different ways. You can say it existed before, you can say it's a new thing, it's independent, but irrespective of how you want to look at it from an intellectual discussion, I don't know if it makes a difference. The real clarity here is that everything is the Creator is part of everything, the Creator has a purpose. And we don't have to understand the desire and everything the Creator wants. We only need to listen to the little piece that we need to listen to. And if we learn to listen to that, everything will come into place. Any questions? Okay.